Hello friends, welcome to See Astrology and Happy New Year to all my subscribers, and may God bring prosperity in 2023 to everyone. So today we are going to discuss about paap kartari yoga, which is a very important yoga in a Nadi astrology. As compared to conventional astrology like in Vedic astrology, this yoga is of some different kind, but in a Nadi astrology this yoga is of some different kind. So there is difference between paap kartari yoga as compared to the conventional astrology. So in this class we will learn all about paap kartari yoga and what are the remedies if any planet is hemmed between two planets and it forms a paap kartari yoga. Then what are the remedies? That also we will discuss in this class. So I request all my students to please make notes of everything, because recordings are not provided as I have told you earlier also. So let's begin our class today, and before beginning our class I pray to Lord Ganesha and I pray to Lord Shanidev to help us to learn this divine knowledge. So let's begin. So today's topic is paap kartari yoga. It is very important concept in a Nadi astrology, and to learn this concept of paap kartari yoga, first you need to understand the friends and enemy chart. That is important, because on the basis of friends and enemies chart, the second rule of paap kartari yoga comes into picture, comes into limelight. So we will start with friends and enemies chart. I have already made the chart on the board for the convenience of all the students. So for sun, you can see Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter and Ketu are friends, and Venus, Saturn, Rahu are enemies. For Moon, Sun, Mercury, Jupiter, Ketu are friends, and Mars, Venus, Saturn, Rahu are enemies. So one thing you have to note here, for Moon, Mars is considered as an enemy planet. This is slightly different as compared to conventional astrology, where Moon and Mars are close friends. But in Nadi astrology there are some different rules which you need to follow. For Mars, Sun, Jupiter, Ketu are friends, and Moon, Mercury, Venus, Saturn, Rahu are his enemies. Again you can see Moon here is enemy to Mars, and for Moon, Mars is his enemy. So for Jupiter, Sun, Moon, Mars, Saturn and Ketu, this thing you have to remember in mind. For Jupiter, Saturn is a very close friend. The reason behind this is Jupiter is the Jiva Karaka and Saturn is the Karma Karaka. So Jiva Karaka and Karma Karaka has to be a friendly planet. So that is why Jupiter and Saturn in Nadi astrology are friends. Rahu, Venus, Mercury enemies of Jupiter. Here you can note down that for Jupiter, Mercury considers himself as his enemy, but when we will study Mercury there is some difference. For Venus, Saturn, Rahu, Mercury friends, Sun, Jupiter, Mars and Moon enemies. For Saturn, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, Rahu are friends, Mars, Moon, Ketu, Sun enemies. For Rahu, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, Saturn friends, Sun, Moon, Mars enemies. For Ketu, Sun, Mars, Jupiter friends, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Saturn enemies. For Mercury, Sun, Moon, Jupiter, Venus, Saturn, Rahu are friends, and Mars and Ketu are enemies. So here you can note down, for Mercury, Jupiter considers himself as his friend. So whenever Mercury is in trouble, Jupiter will definitely help him. So there is one yoga which I remember I need to explain to all my students. When there is break in education of any native, if Jupiter aspects Mercury, that native will 100% complete his education even after a lot of breaks or even after a lot of changes, but finally he will complete his education. This is the role of Jupiter, because for Mercury, Jupiter acts as a friend, but for Jupiter, Mercury considers himself as his enemy. So this you have to note down here. So this is the friendship and enemy chart of the planets. There are certain different rules for this as compared to conventional astrology. So now, so now we will straight away jump into our topic, paap kartari yoga. So in conventional astrology, when you learn Vedic astrology especially, paap kartari yoga means that if any planet is hemmed between two malefics, then it is considered a paap kartari yoga. For example, Sun, if it is hemmed between Saturn and Rahu on the either side, they say that this Sun is in paap kartari yoga. But there are a lot of contradictions on this as well, which Saturn and which Rahu. Saturn can be the Lagan Lord of that chart, so the functional malefics need to be considered here, not the natural malefics. There are certain rules, but we will not go into the Vedic astrology. But for Nadi astrology, there is some different rule. What is the rule? If any planet is surrounded or it is hemmed between two enemies, then it is considered in a paap kartari yoga. This is the definition in Nadi astrology. This we will learn with the help of example. Let's say Sun in Aries is considered an exalted planet, but here also you need to remember few things which we will learn in the coming classes, that there are certain degrees, like for Sun there are 0 to 10 degrees. If it comes in that belt, like if Sun has like 5 degrees or 6 degrees, 7 degrees, then only it will be considered as exalted planet. Means from 0 to 10 degrees, it is the exaltation belt of Sun. This I will explain you in the coming classes. So let's, in this example, if Sun is exalted, Sun is powerful here, what I will do for Sun, Venus, Saturn and Rahu are his bitter enemies. So let's say if I place Venus here, if I placed Rahu here, so this is forming a paap kartari yoga, because this Sun which is exalted in Aries, it has full power, but now one house ahead and one house behind, there are two bitter enemies. So the qualities of the Sun will be destroyed completely. So what is Sun? Sun is the karka for father in Nadi astrology. Sun is the karka for, you can say, name and fame. Sun is the karka for government job. Sun is government itself. So karkatva of Sun will definitely get spoiled. So you can predict like this: father can have problem in his life, the name and fame for the native, there will be problem, or he may face some difficulties from the government as well, because the karkatva of Sun gets weakened here. So this is the one thumb rule of paap kartari yoga, which is applicable to all the planets here. That is why I have written here all the friends and enemies chart. So this thing you have to remember. Now we will jump into our second rule, which is very important. Let us say if Saturn is placed here. Now what is our basic rule? One house ahead, one house behind. If I place Mars here and Moon here, you can easily say that this Saturn is in paap kartari yoga. Why? Because Moon and Mars are his enemies, bitter enemies. So this Saturn forms a paap kartari yoga. But now what I will do, I will write Mercury also here. Now there is some confusion which you need to understand, whether this Saturn is forming a Paap Kartri Yoga or not. This will be cleared with the help of degrees of the planets. So what I will do, let's say Mars here is at 10 degrees, Mercury here is at 20 degrees. So this means no planet is retrograde here. I'm not taking any planet as retrograde planet, all the planets are direct. So Saturn, ahead of Saturn you can see Mars at 10 degrees, then after Mars you can see Mercury at 20 degrees. So this Saturn is forming a Paap Kartri Yoga. The profession of the native will be in a trouble, or he will have a very laborious kind of job. He will work as a laborer, he will work as a low profile worker in any company, because ahead of Saturn there is Mars and behind there is Moon. So his profession will not get stable in his life. There will be a lot of struggles related to profession. But now what I will do, I will rearrange the degrees and let us see what happens here. I take Mars at 18 degrees and Mercury at 10 degrees. Now the situation has changed. This you need to analyze very carefully. Saturn, in his preceding house, it has Moon. The first rule is applicable. Any planet which has an enemy behind it, then it can form a Paap Kartri Yoga, but you need to check the second house of that planet. So from Saturn, first Mercury will be there, because Mercury is at 10 degrees and Mars is at 18 degrees. Mars has crossed Mercury and it is about to enter the next house after crossing 12 degrees. So this Saturn is not forming a Paap Kartri Yoga here. This you have to analyze very carefully when you see a chart, because this is very important. If you commit a mistake and say that this Saturn is forming a Paap Kartri Yoga, your predictions are definitely going to be wrong. So this thing you have to be very careful. Just see the degrees of the planet. Which planet is ahead in degrees, that planet goes far away in the house, in that particular house. But which planet that and any other planet which is lower in the degrees, that remains in that particular house, in the front part of that house. Like in this scenario, Saturn and Mercury, they have close conjunction. Ahead of Saturn there was Mercury, and Mercury is a friend of Saturn. So these are the two rules you need to understand. This will be applicable to all the planets, including Rahu and Ketu. And Rahu and Ketu, you always need to remember one thing: they are always retrograde, they move backwards. So according to their degrees, you have to calculate whether Rahu is moving towards that planet or Rahu is moving away from that planet, and is there any planet in between them. Then you can easily analyze with the help of degrees. Now, as I told you earlier, what is the saving factor now? Let's say if this Saturn is forming a Paap Kartri Yoga, there is Mars ahead and there is Moon behind. So it's a complete Paap Kartri Yoga. The qualities of Saturn will be destroyed. But if this Saturn is aspected by one of his friends, let's say if Rahu aspects Saturn, the aspects which are to be taken into consideration are 1, 5, 7 and 9. These are the aspects you need to take into consideration because this is very important. So if Rahu from the first aspect means if Rahu is placed here and Saturn is forming a paap kartri yoga, then this Rahu will definitely help Saturn to revive from that paap kartri yoga. If Rahu is placed here 1 2 3 4 5, it's going to aspect Saturn, a trinal aspect. If Rahu is placed here 1 2 3 4 5, the ninth aspect 7 8 9, I am counting reverse, 5 houses ahead 5 houses behind is also a trine aspect. If Rahu is placed here, he is going to throw his direct aspect on Saturn. The same rule applies for any of his friends, like if Jupiter or Venus, they aspect Saturn. Venus here cannot aspect Saturn because Mercury I have already placed here. The only two friends, Jupiter and Rahu, can help Saturn here. This rule will be applicable to all other planets as well. If any planet is hemmed between his enemies and any of his friend gives 1 5 7 9 aspect, then this is a saving factor for that planet. Instead of getting weak, he will at least give 60% results even in spite of being in paap kartri yoga. So this is very important rule. I have explained you the friends and enemies chart, the paap kartri yoga, and how paap kartri yoga is formed between the degrees of the planets. That is very important. Now there is another rule which you need to understand, that any planet which is retro, let's say if Saturn here was retro, then you need to consider the presence of this Saturn in this house as well. So this is very important, and in the same condition it will form a paap kartri yoga if Mars is here, Moon is here, and even if Saturn is retro, because after retrogression he is going to touch Moon. The presence of Saturn is counted in the previous house as well. So this will again form a paap kartri yoga. This you have to analyze very carefully when you see that any planet is getting retro. Same would be the case here. Even if Mars is retro here, he has his presence in the previous house, and even if Saturn is retro here, he has his presence with the Moon. So again that yoga is forming of paap kartri yoga. For retrograde planets, you always need to remember one thing, that all retro planets, they have their presence in the previous house. This you always remember, that is very important. All other factors are same. Sun, Moon are not retro, Rahu, Ketu are always retro, and it's a simple concept. So paap kartri yoga I think would be very clear in this video. I have explained it very clearly with the help of degrees as well, with the help of the friends and enemies chart as well. So you need to understand this concept. This is very important. Who is my friend, who is my enemy? And if I am surrounded by two enemies and there is no support from my planet and no support from my friend, if my friend is not expecting me, then definitely I am in trouble. So the karkatwas of that planet will be 100% spoiled, and he will give very bad results in the progression of Jupiter and Saturn. So this rule applies in case of exalted planet as well. If Sun is exalted here but it forms a paap kartri yoga and there is no aspect of any friend on Sun, then this exalted Sun will not give good results. So this you have to remember very clearly, and later on with the help of this example of paap kartari yoga. You can practice this in lot of charts and you will see lot of predictions coming out of this. So that's all for today, and in the next coming classes we will learn about the degrees of the planets. That is very important, which planet is exalted in which degree, what is his belt, what is his exaltation belt, what is his debilitation belt. That is very important. In the coming classes we will learn about that. Thank you very much and have a good day ahead.